You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome to episode 159 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week I'm happy to be sharing a group conversation that we had on the topic of sponsorship. And you may remember me talking about this when reading listener email. Darren F., who has been on a number of podcast episodes, suggested this as a group discussion topic, and it was awesome. Even though we covered a lot, there was a lot more that we could have talked about, and I do plan on doing another group discussion on sponsorship in the future. So we recorded this in late March, just after the Bay Area retreat. The beginning of the month was really busy for me in planning for the retreat, and so I was really grateful to grab a few people here and talk about this important topic. Last summer, I was honored to be part of a group panel discussion on sponsorship up in Sacramento, and that was the Summer of Sponsorship, and we put that out as episode 136. They were planning on doing another one this May, but didn't really have the time and commitment to get it organized for the weekend that they were hoping. I just listened back to that one to figure out what I read at the beginning of that episode, and I did read from the pamphlet called Getting a Sponsor. So for this episode, I was looking at a number of readings from Voices of Recovery. And as I'm recording this, the Voices of Recovery for today was one that I almost chose. There were a lot of potential readings from Voices of Recovery, and it came down to two, and I chose September 15th from page 259. And it starts out, "We don't need to be experts about life or even about addiction in order to sponsor someone. We simply share the knowledge and experience we have gained from working the 12 steps and using the tools of the program, and we pass on the wisdom we've learned from our own sponsor and others in the fellowship." And that comes from Sex Addicts Anonymous, page 14. "Our sponsors share their experience, strength, and hope with us. They show us by example how to live in sobriety, and most importantly, they guide us through the 12 steps. Often, we first meet our sponsors when they share at meetings. We identify with them. In a moment of courage, we ask them to be our sponsor. This may be our first act of trust in another human being. Over time, maybe for the first time in our lives, we create a relationship of trust with another person. Our sponsors encourage us, and we begin to learn our own true worth. Our sponsors encourage us to pass this gift on to other recovering sex addicts. When someone asks us to be their sponsor, we say yes, because that is what our sponsors did for us. We share freely with our sponsees and guide them through the 12 steps. We give away the program of recovery, and we maintain sexual abstinence. In all things, we remember that we are in the care of the God of our understanding." And the meditation, "Do I seek to learn from my sponsor's experience and hope? Am I willing to be a sponsor? How have I shared my knowledge and experience with other recovering sex addicts?" I really enjoyed this reading, and the other one that I almost read was from September 12th, which was on 256, if anyone is interested in looking at that. Both of them covered different aspects of the conversation that we had in this group chat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to that conversation. So in this group chat, we have Darren, who was the originator of the email. We also have Tom N., who was on episode 139, How Do Areas, Delegates, and GSRs Work with the SAA Conference? Tom is the chair of the conference steering committee, and I did want to talk a little bit about the conference after this recording. And we were also joined by Jamie, and Jamie was on episode 10. And I invited them on to talk about sponsorship because they did a workshop on sponsorship at the retreat a few years ago. And I reached out to a few other people that were on part of that panel. But yeah, Jamie was really interested in showing up. I had also lent an invitation to Tracy, who was just on episode 154. She almost made it, but like I mentioned, we didn't cover all the topics of sponsorship in this recording, and I do want to have another panel discussion on this topic. And now, without further ado, I'm ready to share the recording from our group chat in March talking about sponsorship. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it. I put out a call at the retreat to see if anyone was interested, and the retreat is a busy thing, so didn't get a lot of responses. And Jamie, I was hoping to see you there. I know you had a workshop scheduled, and
unfortunately, I got sick. I got really ill.
I hope Tracy can come. That'd be cool.
Yeah. So she has sponsored lots of women in the program, and the episode that we did, she talked about the recovery group that they have, and it sounded really amazing. So thought she would be perfect for this episode. I gave her the information yesterday, so I don't know if she can really fit it into her schedule.
I invited a friend from Tucson, Elizabeth, and we came in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Elizabeth N. from Tucson, but it was kind of late notice for her because I just asked her today. But she might be a good resource in the future. She came in the same time I did in the late 80s.
Okay. Yeah, I believe we had Elizabeth out. We did a half-day workshop. It was originally set up to be retention for women in SAA, and it turned out to be a workshop on diversity and inclusion. So, yeah, we had her out to be one of the guest panelists.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That was, God, maybe 10 years ago. It's been a while.
Okay. So, but wow, that's great. I think she sponsors a lot of women. I mean, like, her sponsees have 20 years, you know.
Wow.
That's why I reached out to her, because I was like, can you or someone you sponsor do this? But there wasn't enough time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to get this shindig started. So welcome to the podcast. You have all been on here before, and I will go around and introduce you. But this original email came from Darren back in, October, something like that?
I don't know. Yeah, it was like 5 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Few months ago. Yeah, that's good to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Darren. And we have Tom N., who is the CSC chair. And I remember having you on the episode where we were talking about areas and GSRs and all that sort of stuff. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we also have Jamie. And Jamie, we were talking about just before the recording, Jamie was on episode 10. And I remember, I think it was last year or the year before, he did a workshop on sponsorship.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I reached out to a couple of people in the Bay Area who have done various workshops on sponsorship over the years. Last summer, I was really fortunate to take part in a half-day workshop in Sacramento called the Summer of Sponsorship. And it was a fun panel. And so we were talking a little bit earlier about Tracy hopefully being able to join us on this episode. So Tracy's sponsee, Diana, was a panelist on that episode, or that workshop, and we turned that workshop into an episode. This is a topic that does need to be discussed over and over. And I remember starting out the podcast, this was a topic that I wanted to approach at the very beginning and never quite got it lined up. And it took a long time to actually talk about sponsorship. And so, Darren, did you have any questions or things to kind of lead us around, or just kind of...
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Jason. Appreciate that. Yeah. No, certainly we can come up with some, and we got some experienced members here, so I look forward to kind of seeing where the conversation goes. Certainly don't have an agenda with it. I'd love maybe just kind of hear each of us, the four of us, what it was like when someone said, hey, will you sponsor me for the first time? Mm-hmm. Right? Just kind of get those initial feelings. What did that look like? How'd you feel? When did you start sponsoring? How'd you know you were ready? Were you ready, if you ever are? But maybe just a little bit of a description of that. kind of here to get us going, kind of introduce the audience to how we started sponsoring, perhaps.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Yeah, it took me a year and a half in program to actually reach out to get a sponsor. I was going to one meeting a week, and we did not have a lot of experienced people in that meeting, and I kept relapsing. And so it was recommended that I seek out other meetings and got a sponsor there. He took me through the first step and the beginning of step 2. And my next sponsor, we did a lot of step work together multiple times through the steps, but he held me until I had done at least 1/9 step amends. So as I was progressing through the steps, I remember getting people coming up and asking if I was available to sponsor. And I unfortunately had to say no. I am still working on my step work and not able to do that yet. But once I finally got to that spot where I could start taking on sponsees, I felt like an imposter. It's like, I don't know if I could do this. And I've had this conversation with my sponsees that I felt very overwhelmed. But when my sponsor calmed me down and said, just start with the circles, start with the first step questions, and just go from there. And it was a lot easier to handle at that level rather than I don't need to know all the answers to all the questions and how am I going to do a 9th step with this person? And it's like, that time will come when it comes. So yeah, I was very nervous at the beginning. Who else would like to jump in?
Well, I remember being very nervous about being asked to be a sponsor. And I had heard so many stories over several years of people sponsors, helping them with big life decisions like job stuff, career stuff, and, primary relationship stuff. And of course that can all be part of it. But I felt like I don't know what to tell someone about whether they should stick in this job or that job or stay in this relationship and things like that. And so, I had that minute where I was really nervous. What if I say yes to someone that I'll sponsor them? And then I realized that I had been through the steps with a sponsor, and all I needed to do was stick to the steps, stick to working the steps, using what, my own experience and what I'd heard from other people who'd worked the steps. And then if I stayed focused on that, okay, maybe there are sponsors out there who just have a crystal ball and know when you should make that big career change or something. In the groups that I was in, there weren't a lot of people staying sober who'd worked the steps at that time. So I figured as long as I stuck to my own experience and the step work, I'd be way better than nothing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Jason, you mentioned feeling like an imposter, and I remember having that same feeling. I remember for me, my first sponsor, after I delivered my 5th step, is when he said, "Oh, now you're ready to be a sponsor." That's the rite of passage was after that. After that day, spending a whole day just going over all my character defects and all those spreadsheets of information, then you get sprung on you, "Oh, now you're ready to be a sponsor." And I was like, "Oh gosh, okay, I don't know if I'm ready for this." And so that sense of feeling like an imposter resonates with me as well. This is an act as if program, in a lot of ways. And I feel like that's kind of how sponsorship goes, or at least that's how it felt for me too, is just finding my way through and acting as if I didn't need to have all the answers. Yeah, I just had to kind of be open to how that would go. And I'm grateful for having a sponsor who would answer my questions about being just being able to use that resource and so many others. Yeah, and I guess I just want to say now, and we can maybe talk about it later, is the first person I sponsored was someone who was previously incarcerated, and I don't have experience in that arena. I think there's something to be said about being aligned with the person that you're sponsoring, and some sort of similar background. They say that a lot, but I just sort of jumped in, and that was the first person that asked me. But now I sponsor an incarcerated person who's in prison for life, and he's one of the dearest people in my life. And so we can talk about that later, because I think there's a profound relationship that can happen between sponsor and sponsee as well. I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, let's remember to come back to that. So this is Darren. Just a quick history on my experience. So I came into the SA Fellowship back in November of 2010 in the DFW, the Dallas Fort Worth area. We have a bunch of meetings. I live in a northern suburb, and so I had to drive about 15, 20 minutes to one meeting, about 30, 35, 40 minutes to another type of meeting, similar distance to others. And I was, when I attended my first meeting, I was told to go to as many meetings as you can just to see who's there and meet everybody. And, again, they talked about finding at least a temporary sponsor. And so I even struggled finding a temporary sponsor because some of the meetings I was attending, there just wasn't even that available. I thought that was normal at the time. I see it a little bit differently today, but finally found 3 months into attending meetings, I found my full-time sponsor at a Wednesday night meeting here in Dallas. He was of the type of lineage where they work the steps quick. And so he and I were through the steps, not totally finished, but generally through the steps in about 45 days. Started getting me into the amends process at step 9, making amends. We talked about steps 10 and 11 as I'm making amends. And we kind of had that formal conversation about step 12, which he asked me the question, well, Darren, do you think you've had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps you've done so far, which was 1 through 11, a little bit of 9. I'd made some in-person amends with the local folks in my life. And I didn't really know how to answer that question, but I knew it was an important question because step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry that message to the addicts. And so I figured I need to know if I've had one. And so sitting there at a Starbucks having this conversation, I didn't feel real different, just kind of look the same, feel the same. My life's still a mess. Relationships are struggling. I don't know, but I'm sober for that time that I've been working the steps, 45 days, whatever it was, 90 around that time. And he's like, well, Dan, let me help you. What are you thinking about today? What'd you wake up thinking about? And that was kind of an easy question to answer. Well, I thought about, meeting you later and going to a group later. And I thought about work and the family and the kids and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, that's good. Notice one of the things that you're not thinking about. I'm like, I'm still asleep to this. And he's like, you didn't think about acting out, did you? I'm like, holy cow. Yeah, no, I really haven't thought about that for a few weeks now. Right. And he's like, welcome to a spiritual awakening. Right. It was just that simple again. And that obsession of the mind that I didn't want to act out, and I didn't feel like I was fighting it, right, or obsessing about it, either obsessing about not doing it or doing it. It just kind of had gone away without even saying goodbye. And it was really that simple. It's like, okay, is that it? All right. And then he told me to start raising my hand in the meeting because that home group at the end of the meeting, we raised our hand if we were available as a sponsor, not just a temporary sponsor, but as a sponsor. And he told me, all right, Darren, it's time to start raising your hand at the next Wednesday night meeting. And I was scared to death, right? Again, like y'all said, I didn't feel like I was worthy. Who would want Darren a few weeks, months sober to sponsor him when they could have my sponsor or some of the other guys who've been around a little while to sponsor them? And he just simply said, well, Darren, I'm busy sponsoring a lot of people. You don't have any, right? So go after them. And so from that time to the first person asking me, coming up to me after a meeting going, hey, Darren, can you help me? It's probably about 3 months later, so kind of about a 6 month into the fellowship before a gentleman, I remember him, came up and asked me. And again, was I ready? No. Did I want to? I kind of knew I needed to do it, right? Because the theme of all of our recovery books is you need to pass this on if you want to stay sober. And I wanted to stay sober. So it's like, all right, I guess I got to do it. I don't know how to do it. I hope I can do it. And I expressed some concerns to my sponsor. How do I answer like those questions that Tom was saying? It's like, no, it's not about that, right? It's about, can you take them through the book? Can you do just step by step by step? And if you got a question, call me. And the good news, Darren, when you call me now, we don't have to talk about you. We could talk about other people, right? Because we're thinking about others and trying to help others. And that becomes more interesting. And the other thing he said, which stands out today, because I was worried about like hurting them, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. He's like, Darren, they're already dying. You can't make them worse. I'm like, okay, you're right. I don't think I'll kill anybody. I'm not that powerful, right? So again, it really took a lot of the pressure off. And again, it's not your responsibility to keep them sober. It's your responsibility to lay out the tools So anyway, it's so from 6 months. So that was like back in 2011 to today. I've been blessed with just constantly people coming into my life asking for help. So
nice. Yeah, it took me a long time to get my steps done. So I've done the steps on a rapid pace afterwards. But yeah, the first time, like I said, it took me a year and a half to get a sponsor. And then once I started working the steps, it took me a couple of months to do my first step. I got triggered by the stuff that I was writing and acted out, shelved it for a while, came back to it. And I came into the program as an atheist, and so I thought I was going to have a difficult time with steps 2 and 3. But again, I've been in the program for a few years, and my mentality had shifted on what spiritual principles that I was bringing in from just being at meetings. So it wasn't about finding religion. It was about finding a power that can help me. And so I propelled through those rather quickly. Four, a lot of people get stuck on that. And it took me a long time to get through 4 and 5. And then 6 through 8 went really quickly. 9 took quite a while. So I'd been in the program for quite a few years before I was actually able to start taking people on. But yeah, I love the rapid approach. I think that we've done a couple of different workshops here in the Bay Area, or I remember when I was looking for a sponsor in between my first and second, that a lot of the people were at meetings up in San Francisco where they were doing the steps in a 6-month time frame. And this is, pre-Zoom, obviously. All the people that I was hoping to see at meetings, I didn't have a lot of numbers, but they were all at other meetings. And so, yeah, it took a while to find someone that I could work with, but seeing those types of groups going through the steps in a limited amount of time can churn out people that are ready to start taking on others.
I think listening to you guys, this is Tom again. One of the things that I say sometimes in meetings, but I want to say more, like my home group right now, we have like a third, any given week, a third to a half of the people are there are newcomers. We just had this big influx of newcomers last 6 months or so. And I want them to know that even though a lot of the steps require work, they're associated, completing the step is associated with some kind of relief generally, not just like it's done, but like, a lot of the steps have promises associated with them, not just the promises, the 9th step promises, but other promises. And I think it's bears repeating, for people who are deciding like, do I binge watch a show? Do I play a video game, or do I do my step work? Hey, It's not just like you should do this because your family or, somebody wants you to stay sober. It's like you're going to feel better. Your life's going to be better. Things are going to work out for you better after you do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is this interesting assumption that doing step work is a lot like doing homework when we were in school, as opposed to really understanding that there's value in every step. Like and you were speaking to this, Tom, and I just wanted to double down on it, is like just the doing of the step. There's a journey to go on, and afterwards there's something to learn, something to take away, some relief, as you called it, some inkling of the promises. And I love the promises. I always held the promises as this sparkly thing that I got to start witnessing dividends from my program, just like what would result from that. And that is a direct result from helping to walk people through the steps. And it's more that it's not just homework and a thing to check a box. It's really, there's such beautiful value out of that. And that is the primary job of a sponsor, as far as I'm concerned. And that's what's been handed to me from my sponsor and my sponsor's sponsor. And all three of my sponsors have had the same, there is no such thing as a grand sponsor, but I do have a grand sponsor, and he is the sponsor of all of my of all of my sponsors. And I'm grateful for that continuity, because it is a little bit like a Godfather situation is
Mhm.
like, I remember just back to like finding my first sponsor. I went to that big Saturday morning meeting and I raised my hand through tears and said, I'm looking for a sponsor. And I got this little slip of paper and it just had a name and a phone number. And it was like, is that how this works? It's so like, I don't know, black market, like, I don't know, just something underground. And it was,
Right.
but I'm grateful for how that all works.
Jamie, I love how you brought up the lineage, which is kind of what I refer to that, right? It's
Mhm.
important, and it because oftentimes people think we're doing this alone. Okay, now I'm sponsoring. I guess I'm doing it alone, and it's not. It's I got my sponsor and my sponsor and his sponsor, and to tap into that knowledge and experience. It's important. Again, if your sponsor doesn't have a sponsor, I'd say find another sponsor. Why not? I think we all, regardless of how long I've been around, I need one.
Mm.
Because we all got stuff that happens today that I need to do 10 steps with and just seek, to be able to talk to someone. So, yeah. Jamie, do you want to talk about that topic before we forget? You were talking about, can I sponsor someone who's like vastly different than me? If I'm 50, can I sponsor a 20-year-old kid? If I've never been to jail, can I sponsor someone who's in jail or been to jail? If I've never been arrested, can I sponsor someone who's been, or do we have to find the exact kind of person who acted out like me,
Right.
lives like me, married like me, straight like whatever? What's your experience with that been over the years?
Yeah, I think that's, I feel like the conversation in the rooms is, or some kind of talk around that is to find some kind of alignment. If you're married and you have kids and you're losing your spouse, or, if you got to disclose, like, it makes sense to meet with someone who has had some similar experience. I get that. As a queer person, I have I've wanted to make myself available to other LGBTQ folks. Um, yeah, and so I think that works in a lot of ways, and it is useful. I also suffered, most of my childhood was fraught with abuse and molestation, and I think that's a story for a lot of us. But that is something I know firsthand, and I'm willing to talk about it a lot of, and so I want to also make myself available for people who are struggling and they're just coming into program, and that is part of their story, and they don't even know how to talk about it. So I do want to find the alignment, especially where I can be available for people in that way. And
Mhm.
say no, it's also not. As I mentioned, my first sponsee was someone who was previously incarcerated, had just come out of prison, and was finding his way in the rooms. And we had that is actually how I found my way when someone said, "Do you want to sponsor someone in the prisons?" I was like, "Yeah, I do," and I've been sponsoring. I have two sponsees right now, and one of them is an incarcerated person. And just to kind of quickly say, I had an alias, and to protect me, I had my I'd write letters directly to him. He would send letters to the PO box at the ISO. The ISO would scan them and mail them to me. I read them and then wrote back. Like, that was the circle. And then at some point we got phone rights. I eventually shared with him my real name, and we now we talk a lot on the phone. We get 15 minutes at a time, and then we usually go, "Okay, I'm available if you want to call back." And usually we talk for about an hour,
Mhm.
and and then I actually, last year at this time, I hadn't met him, but a year ago in April, I met him for the first time. I had never met him in person. I didn't know what he looked like. I gathered he was a black man from the tone of his voice, but otherwise I didn't really know. And this was someone I said, "I love you" to, and he said, "I love you" back on the phone. I just couldn't imagine, like, he has to initiate all the phone calls. I just couldn't imagine him being in prison and being as and wanting so much for himself to not you say those words to him and know that he is cared for. And so when I finally got to meet him in person, it was nothing but, I actually have chills up my neck right now talking
Mhm.
about it. And,
yeah,
and
me too.
And I've gotten to see him 3 times, and the last time was just a couple days after Christmas. The relationships we have with our sponsees can be so profound, and the other is we just learn so much about ourselves. I've grown so much in all my character defects have come out of my control. I wanted sobriety for my sponsees more than they ever did. But we do, like, these can be amazing relationships with people, but also, just relationships with ourselves, how to be gentle with ourselves when we encourage our sponsees to be gentle with themselves. So anyway, I just know I threw out a lot there, but there's just so much about sponsorship that I think is just a jewel of this program.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to touch it in an hour here. We'll have to come back.
Yeah.
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get a lot of people that relate to me in a number of different ways. At meetings, I announce that I'm a minor attracted person. I announce that I'm an intimacy avoidant. And a lot of people know me as coming into the program as an agnostic, and that my higher power speaks to me through music and nature. And so people that kind of gravitate towards any of those subjects will usually approach me to sponsor. One of my sponsees, I haven't seen him in quite a while, but he is a gay Catholic, and completely, in like every sense of the word, his acting out experience is completely different than mine. He's single, I'm married. The whole religious aspect was completely different, but it comes down to the steps. It's not really about completely aligning. He saw that I had worked the steps and wanted to work with me. And so, I was really grateful for that. And having met him and having deep conversations, it's amazing. And it also, it helps me relate to people who grew up in a religion and have a profound faith within the church, because I don't have a lot of friends in my social circles that was the case for. And so it was really great to be able to do that. I have sponsored people in the UK, having the ability with Zoom to be able to connect with people and email and stuff, being able to sponsor long distance. And one of my sponsees, he's been on the podcast a number of times, MJ. We met early on in the pandemic when he was living in Florida. The time difference, we had the 3-hour time difference. He moved out to Southern California, not Northern California. So I never got to meet him in person when we were in the same time zone, and he's now in Louisiana. So I hope at some point I'll be able to meet him face to face at some point.
You've never met him face to face?
No, just right. Yeah. Yeah, we just had this communication through phone calls and through Zoom, and it's an amazing relationship over the past 5 years, and really, really appreciate that. So, Tom, do you have any thoughts on the subject of aligning or diversity?
Well, I think especially when we're new, we identify a lot of times on the basis of the problem. And even now, after decades, like a lot of my acting out was in the 20th century, right? And so, or the early 21st century, and so it's a lot of in-person stuff. And when a newcomer comes into my group, and they're also talking about in-person stuff, I'm like, hey, what am I? What's I think even more powerful, or maybe a sign of recovery, is when we identify with the feelings and the spiritual experience, of like the level of despair, the hope, the birth of hope, regaining something we had lost, or having positive experiences in sobriety that we thought we might never have had if we weren't in recovery, so that's really powerful. There's a story that's so good, even though it's from another fellowship. It's on this topic. So I heard this speaker, and there've been a couple of times where I was listening to a speaker and I really didn't like them, and then they said something that changed the game for me, And And so this guy was saying he was a really straight guy from Southern California, and a gay man had asked him to be his sponsor. And after they got to know each other a little bit, the sponsor said, "Wouldn't you be more comfortable with another gay man?" And, like, "Are you sure you want me to be your sponsor?" And the sponsee said, "Gay is not my problem." Like, that is not a problem for me. My problem is my addiction. And you have a solution that I want in that area. So I keep that in mind. Like, on one hand, I'm really strong in this identification stuff and how important that is to getting hope and to feeling less alone, to feeling a part of the group and, part of the fellowship. But I always keep in mind that guy saw in somebody who was really different, kind of like you guys have already talked about, that there's something spiritual here that I want that doesn't have to do with the particulars, our individual particulars. It's on the spiritual level. So
right. There's really one question that a new person needs to ask the person that they're coming up to ask if you'll sponsor me, right? And that question is, have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps? Maybe there's two questions. Are you a sex addict? Right? Were you a once suffering sex addict? Mm-hmm. And have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps? Everything else after that, or other than that, it doesn't really matter. Like we were just been talking about, right? Because if I was dependent on finding someone who had all the characteristics of my life and how I acted out, I'd probably 15 years later still be looking for that person to be my sponsor. I don't know. I know a lot of stories, heard a lot of stories, never met someone who's acted out exactly like me, right? Or had my circumstances in my life, so it's such again, it takes the pressure off. Again, I am not a person's life coach, therapist, marriage counselor, banker, friend, accountability partner. I'm just a dude who was dying, who's found a way to not die by working these steps, getting spiritually well. And now it's my job to take them through the 12 steps. And we forget about the rest of this fellowship, right? Because if I'm working with someone who has some experience that I don't have experience with, and I know Jason has experience getting free from that particular thing or whatever, I'm going to go, "Hey man, call Jason. He's got experience with that. Talk to him about it." Right? I'm still your sponsor, but so that's the power of the fellowship. Mm-hmm. So any topic in the world, we probably know someone that we can connect our sponsees to, and that allows me to sponsor anybody, regardless of their circumstances. And that's a beautiful thing, because we're going to learn so much. I don't sponsor women. I'm a straight man, married man. It's the one thing I don't do, but I'll sponsor anybody else. It's just too much of an intimate experience for me. But I know women who are sponsors, and so if I meet a woman looking for a sponsor, I can connect them to someone if that's what they want. We do have guys in our groups that can do that. It's just a boundary for me. But there's plenty of women in this fellowship who I would ask to be my sponsor if it would be okay, right? Because it's not about gender or any of that stuff. It's just a clear-cut path through the 12 steps. And if it's not that simple, I think we're overcomplicating it, and I think that's one of the barriers to entry of sponsorship. And clearly, there's a desert of sponsorship in our fellowship.
Yeah,
and maybe we could talk about why. Not that we have the answer, but like what is keeping people from sponsoring? I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot has to do with two factors: people not being far enough in their step work to take on sponsees, and people who are fearful of making that leap into sponsorship. I know someone who's completed the steps and has never sponsored anyone. And it's like, we have so many new people coming in. Tom mentioned this earlier, the influx of new people into the program is, we've got quite a few old timers in the room, but every day there are people coming to the meetings. I talk about the noon Zoom room a lot, where we've got 70 to 80 people on the meeting each day. And so many of those people are just finding the program. A lot of people found that meeting through the podcast because I talk about it a lot. And so they find the podcast, realize that there's the program of SAA, they get to a meeting. And so all of a sudden there's an influx of 20 or 30 new people. And the people that are able to sponsor, there's maybe like 2. And so we can't really take on 15 new sponsees, and it becomes very, very difficult. And so I usually try to keep a limit of 3 or 4 active sponsees working the steps. And beyond that, I have to close it off. But I have, over the past 2 years, opened myself up to temporary sponsorship, where I will get people set up with their 3 circles and then answer the questions in the first step guide. And after that, hopefully enough time has passed that they can find someone else to help propel them through the steps, but at least get them on their feet and moving in the steps.
Yeah, there's something that you said in that, Jason, and just about why is it so hard to find a sponsor right now? And I think this is anecdotal and sort of something I make up. So I'm curious about what the room thinks about this. So I know my sponsor probably has had between like 6 and 8 sponsees, which I think is too many for me. and then my grand sponsor also has maintained probably 8. And I think that just seems like a lot. But what I also think, there's this sweet spot of recovery. I'm in 9 years. I have 9 years of sobriety, and probably around 4, 5, 6 is when I was like, I can take on more. I can do this. I'm in the middle of it. I'm game for all of this and stepping up and being a sponsor. But those people, I don't know. This is what I'm making up. The people who have hit 10, 12, 15, 20 plus years are a little like, I don't know, I'm picturing the dude sitting back smoking a cigar, like, oh, I'm tired of that. Like, I don't do that anymore. That they've been like, oh, I'm in my retirement phase, or I'm in my, like, let someone else kind of steer that ship now. I don't know. And, again, I'm curious because I don't see them raising their hand, and maybe because they're already full and they've already got however many sponsees they can handle. But I do think there's something really beautiful about the opportunity to have someone with so much recovery and so much knowledge. I mean, some of these people in the rooms have actually written the Green Book and, like some of these stories. And how amazing would that be to see them like really have more of a presence and know that they're sponsoring people. And it's anecdotal, it's a quandary, but it does feel like then you're left with all these newcomers who are trying to find someone who has maybe just a hair more sobriety to sponsor them, where I feel like we all deserve a little. I was lucky to find people who had plenty more sobriety to really step up and help me find my way.
On that note of, when are you ready to sponsor? Like a lot of sobriety, a little bit more than the person you're sponsoring. So something I think I want to try to push out and talk about in more venues in SAA is I had been a chronic relapser for like over 10 years. It was very painful. And when I got my current sobriety date, I'm like, okay, I don't even remember, 10, 12 years in recovery. I'm working full time. I have a busy life. I'm not going to go to a meeting a day. However, I stay sober one day at a time. I need an everyday program. And so part of that was totally selfishly getting sponsees who would call me even on the days when I wasn't finding time to reach out. And that was also why I got into service, because it gave me things to do to maintain my sobriety on the days when I wasn't going to a meeting. So it's very practical and very selfish, but at the same time, it's very sobriety focused. Like, yeah, I would do my morning meditation and my evening gratitude stuff in any case, but I needed more than that. I needed to do something real and concrete on a daily basis for my sobriety. It takes, even if you're going to an hour meeting, you got to get there. You get there a little before the meeting starts. You talk after the meeting. It's at least 2 hours out of your day to go to a meeting, right? Generally, I wasn't going to do that, but I could get on the phone with a sponsee for 20 minutes or my sponsor, or sit down and do some step work or work on my service commitments, And so maybe talking to people about like that level of practicality, like this is why you sponsor, because you don't want to be in relapse anymore. Some stuff. You've been going to meetings for years,
Absolutely. It's a 12-step program for a reason, right? It's not an 11-step.
One of the things that a couple of my sponsees have picked up on as they start sponsoring is when they learn stuff from their sponsees. I'm just like, yeah. It's like, oh my God, now I know why you do this. Yeah, there's so many things that I picked up from my sponsees. I started approaching a couple of steps differently because of some of the things my sponsee is like, oh yeah, you see this connection here. It's like, oh, I never knew that. And so I get something out of it. I also get the chance to work on steps that I'm not currently working on. So it's been a long time since I've written a first step, but when I start walking people through writing their first step, I will share what I've written and have to go through reading that again and reliving that. And it's that constant reminder for me.
Rarely have I seen someone who said, Darren, I work the steps too fast. But oftentimes I hear people who are taking a long time and are struggling with sobriety, right? They're not experiencing the promises. And this might be a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it, right? I think in Sex Addicts Anonymous, we work the steps too slowly. And if you study the history of 12-step, that's not the case, that they worked it quickly, right? And again, we're blessed with a program that can be repeated when stuff comes up. If I miss something, forget something, not if I omit something on purpose, but it just, here, I got this issue I need to talk about and deal with. And we got a step that can cover that. So if we can get folks through the steps, all the steps, maybe they're still making some step 9 amends, but they've got the instructions, they've read the books, right? A big book, the original source, the green book for our fellowship. If they've read those books, they kind of know what the program is, and they've got some pretty clear directions on how to work the steps. I need to now duplicate that and repeat that. Because again, it's a 12-step program for a reason. If I don't work all 12 steps, I'm probably not going to stay sober. Okay. It's the power of the program. The program is the 12 steps. The fellowship, the power of the fellowship is attending meetings, fellowshipping with each other, talking to each other, getting to know each other. I need both to stay sober, right? So I have to do both. Again, I've grown so much in my own spiritual awareness, my own personal journey by helping another person work these 12 steps. Every time I take someone through the 12 steps, I'm having my own experience with it. How do I learn to be a sponsor? I learn by doing it. I can't learn it by reading it, by philosophizing about it, by just talking about it. I learned by sitting down at the Starbucks with another sex addict going, all right, here's the book. Let's go through the book. And this is what step 1 is and step 2 and do your homework and let's get it done and let's move through. And it doesn't take long. If it's taken a long time, I might be overcomplicating it. If you told me that I got to commit to you for like 2 years, I don't want to make that commitment. Right. But if you told me, hey, can you and I go through this work in 90 days? I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And I can commit to you to do that, and on and on and on. Right. And so that's just how I've been doing it. And I think there's 15 guys that call me sponsor today. I see a lot of them in my local meetings. Some of them are long distance, so I've never met. And it's always fun to meet a sponsee like was shared. But I've started it with over 80 people. Right. And more people leave than stay. But it's 100% success for me because I'm sober today. And I'm happy about it. And I've learned so much from all those folks who aren't here. We just had a guy in my group come back 10 years later. I'm like, Chris, welcome back. Good to see you. How long has it been? And you always ask, was it better out there or in here? And he's like, yeah, no, it sucked out there. well, welcome back.
Yeah.
And we're here for him. And I'm blessed to be a part of a home group that has a lot of sponsorship because we kind of do it quick and they're now available. And when I'm busy, I hand them over to my sponsors. Hey, I'm full, but here's a guy who needs a sponsee, right? And so we connect the people. We all raise our hand, even if I can't accept someone that day, and someone comes up to me and says, hey, Darren, can you sponsor me at the end of a meeting? Like, hey, no, I can't. Thank you for asking, but let me introduce you to this gentleman over here who can help you with that. And because we all do the same thing. It doesn't matter who you ask, whether I've been here 1 year or 15 years, we're going to do the same thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I hear from a lot of people that are starting to work the steps without a sponsor, where they're going through workbooks, and there's some really great recovery work out there. in our program, I said, if you want to do that book from that author, that's great. But here we're working the 12 steps of SAA, and I'm going to teach you how I've been taught. And so when enough people are like working the steps through step books and have a completely different understanding of what a fourth step is, it makes it really difficult. And so one of my sponsees, he's done the steps before, and we're currently going through step 4, and I'm doing it straight out of the big book in the 12 and 12. The resentments grid, the fears, the harms, etc. And for years and years, before the podcast, I had the Joe and Charlie tapes, and would often give those to my sponsees. Listen to this. I'm going to give you some instructions, but this is going to help you with an understanding of the fourth step. All the steps, really, but their work on the fourth step. It helped me teach the fourth step. But in doing a fourth step grid, as is done in the big book, that becomes a tool that's part of my 10th step. I can do a spot check inventory really quickly. So my sponsee had written out like a whole bunch of stuff, and I was like, whoa, we're doing it in for a 4-column grid. It's like, that seems too simple. And it's like, it's a simple program. So we have to bring it back. We don't need to overcomplicate it with the workbooks from outside resources. You just stick to this. Do a little checkbox here, a checkbox here, right here, find your part in it, and move on. So I think those are kind of the things that takes a long time working through the steps, is if people are overcomplicating it.
Jason, one of the things that you started with that it kind of shook me is this idea that someone is going to try and do the steps or be in this program without help. That is the goal. That is the purpose of this. Absolutely every one of our steps is about, we all know that the opposite of addiction is connection. I'll say that 4 more times if I need to, but the opposite of addiction is connection. And the purpose of going is to find a community who can hear absolutely everything that you need to say, and then find that one person who's going to support you and be your sponsor as they walk you through the steps. So the idea of doing it by yourself, we did our addiction by ourselves, and see where that got us. So the idea of connecting with another person who is willing to hear us and see us in all of our fullness and all the things that we did wrong. I'm using air quotes right now, like what we did to find ourselves spiraling downward. That is the first step, is then you share that in a group. So you have a sponsor, and then you're sharing it with a group. And then step 2 and 3 is about finding a higher power. So you're inviting another person in, another being into your life to help you find more support and more help. And as you move through all the steps, 4, 5, 10, 12, it's all about doing this as a community and growing that community, and then ultimately giving it away with step 12. And so finding another community to grow. So I just wanted to stop and say, I can't imagine showing up in that meeting and thinking I was going to just get a book and do it myself. That is not what this program is about at all. And that's not what sponsorship is about.
Yeah. I'm guilty of this. When I first got into program, I looked at the steps and it's like, okay, yeah, I've done that. I've done that. I'm not going to do this, but I've done.
You were at a grocery store.
Yeah. And so when I hear someone who's been in the program for 2 months and said, yeah, I just finished my 4th step. I was like, have you worked step 1 with a sponsor? No. Okay, well, you can't really have done your 4th step if you haven't started the work with a sponsor. And there's so many things that in my 1st step, having someone else to call me out on my bullshit and let me know where I need to put in more detail, or if I'm overcomplicating things, says, hey, dial that back, or go a little more in depth here, take away from that there. And, I need that outside help. And so this is what I hear at meetings that don't have enough people who are willing to sponsor. It's like, no one's willing, so I'm just going to do it on my own. And it's
also to see you, to celebrate you, to acknowledge you, to champion you. Like, it's not just like get to work. it's also like there are wins involved that, and that's what support looks like too.
Yeah, Tom.
So, two quick things. One, where you are, do you have the saying, the first word of the first step is we? Right? I mean, that all the time. The first word of the first step is we, what Jamie's saying. So Darren and I serve on the conference steering committee in SAA, thinking again of the, not in the abstract, but the actual organization today, what's going on. And one of the guys that we serve with runs these online step workshops where it's like very structured. They run people through the steps, and they put dozens of people through the steps with these workshops. But the thing that I'm hearing from Craig that blows my mind is that people who've been going to meetings for years are showing up there because they can't find anyone to work the steps with them, like a sponsor to actually work the steps. They're just going to meetings where people will go to a meeting once a week, and that's their whole program. So it's real. This problem is real.
Yeah, unfortunately, by the time this episode is released to the public, the event will have already happened. But I know Craig's doing something with SAA South Africa, and they're going to be doing a worldwide thing on doing the steps with the group and how he has approached doing that. And he and I have talked about it after a couple of meetings and things like that. But yeah, there's a group here that's actually started in Indianapolis. One of the guys brought it out here to San Jose, and now he's up in Seattle doing all the steps. I think he does it in 3 chunks and takes a whole bunch of people through the steps. So it's like steps 1 through 3 are these couple of weeks, and then we'll start 4 through 7. I can't remember how he breaks it down, but he's got multiple steps, and they're about to start a new session of that. I just got a text the other day. So I'm going to be announcing that on this week's podcast, but by the time this episode is out, those will have already passed.
Yeah. Well, like Darren was saying earlier, it needs to be a perennial topic because the Conference Steering Committee Communications group just did one of our Let's Talk seminars, and I don't know if you know this already, Jason, but it was on sponsorship. It was the highest attendance ever, 90 people. 90 plus. It was over 100, wasn't it, Darren? We found out.
Yeah, because a couple of the folks that were on there were in a group setting, so there's like 10 people on a group on one phone or computer. But yeah, so clearly there's a desperate need for sponsors in Sex Addicts Anonymous. It's almost kind of sad that since 1977 we find ourselves still in this dilemma where we're having to work steps in groups of large amounts of people because there's just not enough, right? Because the message can be transmitted via Zoom, voice, letters, right? There's really no excuse to not have a sponsor, right? And so work the steps quick with the sponsor, go back to your home group, go back to your local area, get the next new person, work the steps with them. Now there's 2 of you, then that becomes 4, becomes 8. It grows exponentially, and it's not that hard, There's a book that tells us how to do it. Mm-hmm. There's several books, right? Green Book, 12 and 12, Big Book, right? Just take those 3 and have at it. I guarantee you God is going to put someone in your life, and both your lives will change. If they do it and you try to help them do it, you're not going to be perfect at it. Do we make mistakes? Do we say the wrong things? Do we not have answers? Absolutely. That's all right. When your sponsee comes up to you and asks you a question, you first thing say, well, have you looked into the book for the answer, right? Have you prayed about it? Okay. Have you meditated on it? And what do you think you should do? Right. So there's 4 things I could say before I have to come up with my own answer on the topic. Right. Hey, call me back after you've done those 3 things. Meanwhile, I get to think and call my sponsor. Hey, my sponsor just asked me this. What do you think I should tell him? And that's how it works. Or I call Tom, or I can call Jason, or I can call Jamie. Hey, this is what's going on. We're not alone. And so
the other part of that, Darren, is, and you said you were speaking to this earlier. I want to chime in. Then I'll do it now. Is that I love when I don't have an answer and I say, go ask 3 fellows, right? And so we don't always have to have the answers as sponsors, that there's a whole community. Again, why that's so.
Right. Yeah, we don't. I think we think this. I'm the only guy that I can talk to my sponsee and give them the answers. It's like, no, we're going to work the steps together, right? And I'm going to help you do that. But, there's going to be other issues that you're going to come up with. And I have no clue because maybe I'm not married. Maybe I'm not single. Maybe I'm not whatever. All these guys.
What an impression it made on me in my first year or two of recovery when I went to my grand sponsor and, wanted to talk to him about my own childhood sexual abuse that I experienced. And he was a big personality and a big ego. Mm. Said, wait a second. That is not my experience. I don't know anything about that. But give me 3 days and I'll hook you up with somebody who does.
Yeah, it's the importance of knowing each other's stories at a basic level, right? I don't know everyone's story, but I know a lot of them, especially if you have a home group, right? We should be calling up folks and going, hey, give me a 15-minute story, right? So I can kind of get the gist of what you've experienced. And because like you said, maybe I haven't been abused. And if you're coming with me on how to get free of childhood abuse, I don't know. It's not my experience. Call this guy. So that's the importance of knowing our story. And that doesn't have to happen in a meeting, right? Sometimes we have story meetings, but most of the time that happens over breakfast, lunch, dinner, on the phone. During our meetings, we should be studying the solutions, studying the steps, talking about the steps. And
Yeah, one of my sponsees, I remember getting calls from him about how to deal with this sponsee, and they're having all these life problems. They're having problems with their marriage and all of these sort of things. How do I respond to that? And with each one, I was able to pinpoint a certain step. And it's like, I'm not here to solve life problems, but you can find the solution in this step for that person. This person seems like they're in self-will. Hey, let's look at step 3. This person is having a resentment with their partner. Let's work step 4 on that. And so each time all these different life problems were coming in, I kept having to remind him that he's not a life coach. He's there to work the steps, and me having knowledge of where to find those in the book. And it's like, okay, pull up the green book on page 14. You'll find this on page whatever in the big book. I was able to do that. And I was amazed when guys were quoting pages from the big book when I first came into the program. It's like, how do you know that? And by working through the steps and working with other people, it's like I keep referring people to these pages, or I keep hearing readings, and so when someone quotes a page, it's like, okay, I know what step they're talking about. So.
Yeah, again, I was just going to say, again, it's not a self-help program or a sponsor help program. It's a God program, right? It's a higher power program. That's who I need to get answers from and direction from. And oftentimes God speaks through others. In my experience, I don't hear God's voice. I don't know about you guys, but I hear it through the people in this fellowship, by talking to them, by fellowshipping with them. And so again, as a sponsor, all I got to do is tell a sponsee, again, have you prayed about it? And go find someone to help. Go be of service, right? Call me back after that. And the next thing you know, they've done that. They found someone to help, and they're like, hey, next time they call me, hey, you good? Yeah, man. The problem I thought it was, the problem's not a problem. Right, because they've been helping others, or they got the answer. The answer falls in their lap as a result of them stepping out of themselves and helping another sex addict or another person in the community somehow. Get out of self, talk to God, and help another human being, and good chance you might find the answer. Has nothing to do with Darren.
It kind of goes back to my last thought on this. Kind of goes back to the beginning, like, how do I do this? What about the first couple of times I'm with a sponsee as a sponsor? And I had the privilege many years ago of seeing Dr. Paul, who wrote the acceptance story in the big book, give a talk. And he said, there are 4 words that every sponsor must know. Every one of us who's sponsoring must know. He said the first word is, The second word is okay. And so forth. A lot of it is active listening.
What are the other 2? You can't leave us hanging.
I have to listen to the talk.
Oh, I see.
It's really what Jamie was talking about. I'm listening to, I'm hearing you, and I'm letting you know, and I don't always have an answer. I don't even always have a page number. But I'm listening to you, and I'm hearing you, and we're going to find our way through this.
Yeah. So we've been talking for about an hour, a little bit over. I want to thank everyone here for joining me on this conversation. And if anyone had any closing thoughts, I know I had one thing that I wanted to bring up, but I'm not sure if I'll do it here or if I'll do it in the podcast proper. So if anyone has any closing thoughts, please feel free.
Actually, I had a thought, or I just had an aha moment simply by listening to this conversation about how to be a better sponsor. So thank you. That is what sponsorship is about, is like listening and being open and being willing to learn. And I just did. So thank you for that.
Right.
Awesome.
I'm thinking this, Darren. I'm thinking about the folks that are listening to this that are maybe on the fence about sponsoring and their heads full of doubt. They're overthinking it. They're thinking, that's that negative self-talk. Who am I? I don't have anything to offer. And those are just old ideas, right? Those are things that aren't true. Again, if you've worked the steps, if you've had this experience, you have something to offer, right? Ideally, you're sober for a little bit, right? As you work these steps, I kind of have to have that to give it away. And so just start, right? Read the literature. Think about how do I do a step 1? How do I do a step 2? And make some notes for yourself. Talk to your sponsor. You make a little guide, and it isn't complicated. I don't need to rely on Sex Addicts Anonymous to give me a 100-page guide on how to sponsor. It's not that hard. Call me, email us. Or our information's out there. But just start. And you'll be blessed for it. The people that started 12-step weren't ready when they started to carry this message, but they did it anyway. And we're here as a result of them overcoming their fear and their shortcomings and their anxiety and their all that stuff. So just do it. And we need more. We need you if you're listening. We don't need another Jason, Tom, Jamie, or Darren. We need you to get out there and carry this message. So get in there in the trenches with us and watch your life change. You won't be bored. I haven't been bored once in 15 years of trying to carry this message to other sex addicts. So thanks.
Yeah. The closing thought that I had, and it could have been a subject that we could have thrown out there, is the idea of changing sponsors. And whenever I enter a sponsor-sponsee relationship, I went to a workshop on this years before I was ready to sponsor, but talking about the interview process of, what's your sponsorship style? What do you offer? What am I looking for in a sponsor? And having these conversations. And one of the things that I learned in that was that if this relationship isn't working for either of us, it's okay to say, I need to work with someone else or something like that, and that it's not anything personal. So I've had to let sponsees go. I've had a couple of sponsees who have let me go, and it's okay. And sometimes it's for the better.
Absolutely.
Let's do this again, Jason. There's so much more, right?
Yeah.
And we just scratched the surface. So if you get some time, give us a call again. I'd love to keep talking.
Yeah. And I got an email from Tracy. It said she totally spaced on it and she was super excited to join us. And so hopefully I can have her back on here and we can have another great conversation. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining me.
Thanks, you, Jason. Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Many thanks to the guys for showing up for this one, and to Darren for sending out that email way back in October, raising this as a topic for discussion. And I will be planning more group discussions in the future, not only on sponsorship, but other topics. I look back to the early days of the podcast, and we did a lot of group discussions. More recently, been doing the Experience, Strength, and Hope shares, the recordings from Joe and Charlie, or the SAA COSA speaker meeting, workshops, and things like that. So yeah, I would love to get back to doing more group discussions. One of the things that Tom brought up was the Let's Talk sessions that the ISO puts on. I believe it is the conference steering committee that does this, and I've joined quite a few of these over the years. But the one that they were discussing was on sponsorship. And that one, I really wanted to go to that, but it was the same exact weekend as our Bay Area retreat. So I was unable to make it to that one. I'm not sure what the next topic is or when that will be, but the ISO does send out emails with links on how to join that. So if you're interested, please email the ISO, and you can always do that at info@saa-recovery.org. So one of the things I have been really busy with, I am the Area 40 chair, and we are trying to get an area assembly done before the conference, which is happening in just a few short weeks. This business year is shortened. For the past few years, the conference, which is the global business meeting for all of SAA, that was happening in October every year for about the last 5 or 6 years. This year, the convention and the conference are at the same time. And the convention is more of the workshops and speakers and fun social events that will be happening in Austin, Texas this year. The conference will be happening both in person and on Zoom. And unfortunately, it looks like for our area, we are not able to send someone in person, but we will probably be sending a delegate via Zoom. So as the area chair, it is one of my duties to get the assemblies together, and I've been busy with a ton of other stuff. So this weekend, we are actually going to get together as all the Peninsula and South Bay meetings here in the Bay Area. So for that, we'll be discussing if one of us is willing to be the delegate and discussing the business motions that are on the floor for this year. And if you are interested in any of that, you can always check out the service website, saa-iso.org. Part of it is password protected, and I will not give that information out here on the podcast, but I do have the username and password. And if you are signing up for the convention or conference, the information is the same for that as well. So I'm going to keep this outro short. We don't have a lot of new emails. We did get a couple comments on YouTube as well as Apple Podcasts. We're all caught up with the Spotify comments, except for one that I'm saving for LJ's episode. Before going over to YouTube, I wanted to read this review that was just left on Apple Podcasts a few weeks ago. And it says, "Very grateful to find SAA and this podcast. It has helped me feel a part of a community of people trying to be the best people they can be. Supported with groups and my own personal counseling, this podcast helps to supplement support, stories, and insights at a moment's notice. Going through the backlog of the podcast has been like a gold mine of thought analysis." Yeah, thank you very much. And that was a 5-star rating. So if you listen to the podcast on Apple, please rate and review us. That really helps other people find the podcast. If you're on YouTube, you can like and subscribe, and that helps people find it. But I did want to get to some of those YouTube comments. And we did get 3 over the past month or so. And this one comes from episode 57. John R. shares at the SAA COSA speaker meeting. And that's one of the most popular YouTube videos that we have. And it says, "Thank you for your bravery and honesty." This next one from a few weeks ago was on episode 157. Evan shares at the SAA and COSA speaker meeting. And it says, "Really helpful. Thanks, Evan and host. God bless." Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And this last one was from episode 155. Liz P. shares her experience, strength, and hope. And we got 2 comments on this one, actually. One says love with a lot of flower emojis, and the other one says thanks for sharing. And thank you so much for those. And I wanted to read an email. I don't think I read it a few weeks ago, but I think I had mentioned it. This was talking about the Tradition 11 motion that happened at last year's conference. And this one will be changing the wording of Tradition 11. So this business motion will take a few years to get through due to the bylaws of the conference charter. And just to catch people up, Tradition 11 is our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. And the proposed change is changing the language there at the end to just, I forget the exact wording, but changing it to all public media. So that covers social media, that covers the podcast, that covers anything that is not specifically press, radio, TV, and films. So we are looking to have a discussion on this in July. And the email says the convention and conference are approaching. Will you be attending? And I've already mentioned that I won't be able to be there for that. And she says, I've recently booked my flights. I'm going to suggest that we hold an open discussion on the Tradition 11 motion. Shall we fix a date for the podcast? I'd suggest July. Does that work for you? It can be any weekend pretty much for me. Look forward to hearing from you. And yes, I need to reply back to this one. So yes, we will be doing this on a weekend because she is from the UK. And with the 8-hour time difference, it makes it really difficult for us to schedule recording sessions during the week. So I will be moving forward with that scheduling for July. Just thinking of scheduling, I've got a few guests that are in queue to share experience, strength, and hope. And like I had mentioned, with being the area chair for Area 40, I'm currently working on that and have a backlog of recordings so far. So I will finally start scheduling those soon. I had been looking at the last week of April, which is today as I'm recording. So the recordings that I will be scheduling are in May. I did record another first step at the noon Zoom room. So that is another episode that I have there. I will be sharing the recording that I did with LJ fairly soon, as well as the music and recovery workshop that I did at the retreat. So yeah, still a lot of episodes, and just trying to keep everything straight has been a bit of a challenge. But yeah, looking forward to scheduling some new recordings. There might have been one or two more emails that came in just recently, but I will save those for the next episode. If you did want to reach us, you can email us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com if you have any comments about the podcast, any episodes, if you want to share any specific music that is part of your recovery. And if you wanted to get a hold of me personally, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. So with that, I'm going to close out this episode, and I am super grateful for you tuning into this one. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.